Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to MIAC's virtual speaker series, Indigenous Storytelling in Art and Literature. During COVID-19, our museum is continuing to work with New Mexico schools and teachers to support student learning, serving as a key resource for both teachers and students to learn about the Indigenous people throughout the Southwest. In this work, we are often asked about books and resources that teachers can use in their classrooms. And this series is aimed at sharing some of these perspectives from Indigenous scholars and authors. We're really excited to host several amazing folks and to hear about their own experiences in and contributions to the field. So thank you for joining us and for spreading the word about the resources that are shared with us here today. My name is Lillia McEnaney, and I am a curatorial assistant at the museum, and today we'll be chatting with Laurel Goodluck, a children's book author. But before we start talking with Laurel, I'd like to briefly acknowledge the place where this conversation is happening, even though we're in a virtual space, at least on my end, in Ohkay within the Tewa world. As a non-Native person living in so-called Santa Fe, I am a guest in the ancestral homelands of the Tewa people. And I wish to acknowledge all of the Native people, past, present, and future, who walk on these lands. Laurel Goodluck writes picture books with modern Native themes that reflect Native children's cultural experiences and everyday lives, showing Native children that they have a perspective that is unique and powerful. Raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, Laurel comes from an intertribal background of Mandan and Hidatsa from the prairies of North Dakota and Tsimshian from a rainforest in Alaska. Laurel received both a BA in psychology and an MA in community counseling and family studies from the University of New Mexico. She began writing by crafting curriculum for community advocacy involving Native teen leadership and later for children newly diagnosed with mental health challenges. Laurel currently lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico with her Navajo husband, where they raised 2 children who are also bent on storytelling in journalism and filmmaking. Laurel manages her husband's medical clinic while pursuing a career as a writer of children's literature. She was a recipient of the 2019 We Need Diverse Books picture book mentorship and was paired with award-winning author Tracy Sorrell. She also received a competitive funding grant from New Mexico writers to support new works in progress, which I think we'll hear a little bit about today. She is an active regional chapter member of the New Mexico Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. So thank you for joining us. We're really happy to have you, Lori. So I always like to start these conversations off with kind of a genesis of where you got to where you are. So how did you become interested in writing? Did you have a single aha moment that you can kind of look back on, or did it evolve in another way?
Kind of in 2 ways. As you read my bio, you can see that I had a very different background than writing children's literature. I don't have a master's in fine arts or in literature or writing. And it really came to me when I saw that my own 2 sons, who are grown and have careers as storytellers, they opened up this world for me. My oldest son is a journalist, has his master's in journalism from CUNY School in New York City, and he's also a photographer. And so his storytelling is through journalism and telling stories of current events and investigative. And then my youngest son, who also is a storyteller, he's an actor and a filmmaker. And because he started acting at a young age, I was able to go with him when he made these films. So I saw storytelling in independent films. I saw them in multi-million-dollar films being made. And just this art and this way of storytelling just intrigued me, and it was just pure kind of magic. We were a family that always loved films, but to see it being made was just magic. And kind of my aha moment happened when I was visiting my oldest son in New York City. He was finishing out school there. And of course, we went and looked around the city and went to 2 museums. One was the Smithsonian Museum of the American Indian. And at that museum, there was an exhibit of Inuit women. And there are 3 generations of Inuit women, and they were explaining their art that they produced. And what they were saying is people need to still see that we're here and that we are in this modern world and we have our traditions still and we have our culture, but we're also in this modern world. So that kind of sank into me, thinking, yeah, we still are trying to say that in this world, in this modern time. And then we went to Harlem, and we went to the Harlem Museum there, and there happened to be a picture book exhibit. And the picture book exhibit was all by their own voice people in the community that wrote these books. And I just opened up the books and saw that there are modern depictions of people from Harlem, their community, and then the art there was just as striking as it was at the American Indian Museum, with collage and colors. And I left New York saying, I think I can do this. I think I'm going to try and study what it takes to write a picture book. So that's when it happened for me.
Wow. So what was that process like of trying to start from scratch of how to do that? That must be incredible.
That was a good way to say it, because it was starting from scratch. So the first thing that I looked up and used the internet is diversity. How do I get my goal of having our community viewed in picture books, having our community and our voice, our life experience? And so it led me to an organization called We Need Diverse Books. And I just studied what they were doing, looked at the books that they were suggesting, and then they also had programs. They had sharing your story, and they would support you if they accepted your story. And they also had mentorship programs. I'd missed the deadline for that program for that year. So the whole year I sought out other organizations too. Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators is a national program, and they also have a regional group. So I joined that right away and went to their conference. So it was really a year of seeking out and learning how to do the craft of writing and doing it by myself, and finding these organizations by myself. But I wasn't alone. As soon as I was able to seek out people in these organizations, I was able to find mentors and such. And so once I also found an online course called Storyteller Academy, and that is run by Ari Chung out in the California Bay Area. And there I really did a deep dive into learning how to do craft, how to craft books, how to learn about structure, how to add lyricy, how to be poetic in your books. So it was really a good 2 years and still learning of just how to write and craft these books, along with help of mentors.
Absolutely. I mean, 2 years seems like a very fast crash course, you know?
Yeah.
And I really like the importance of mentorship. I think that's so important, especially in fields that revolve around storytelling, because it is all about relationships, right? And in all of this type of work.
Right.
So when you visited NMAI and the Harlem Museum, and you encountered, or I guess more at NMAI, this really, the overarching thread there is we are still here, as you said, right? So why do you think it important for that to be reflective in literature?
Well, it's especially important in children's literature to have representation of your modern life being represented back and reflected to you. We are still here because there's so many stereotypes about Native people. When people think of Native people, they go back in time. They don't go forward. They don't see us now in the moment. And that can be very damaging to people, and that can maintain stereotypes. If you look at children's literature, you'll see that a lot of the literature that first came out went back in time, historical fiction, which is great. We need to have that written down, and we need to have those books, but we also need to keep going forward. Our kids deserve to see and have the same fun and excitement of opening a book and seeing themselves reflected, going through, solving problems, critically thinking, and being the hero of the story. They deserve that same adventure.
And so why do you think picture books are such a good medium for that?
Picture books are great. There's that saying, a picture tells 1,000 words, but it does. And so we have these discussions at home because we have the filmmaker, the actor, the journalist. So we have all these different mediums, and we always are discussing, well, will the picture tell this? What do you, and does the words tell more of the story? But to me, both do. And so as a picture book writer, if you're not the illustrator, if you're just the artist that's writing the words down, you have to write the words down in, at this time, it's about 500 words. They want you to tell the whole story, which includes a protagonist, includes 3 inciting incidents, it includes the child discovering their own answer at the end, all while I'm trying to include cultural elements and community reflecting back what that child is going through. So it feels like it might be easy to write a picture book, but it's really hard. So what's nice about being able to have less words in it is that you're working and collaborating with somebody who's going to provide the visual art to it. So you give them the words, the editor helps find the illustrator. The illustrator is like the set designer. I'm trying to provide less words, and they're going to build this whole world around the rest of the story. So it's a real collaboration. And in some situations, or most situations, you don't even meet the illustrator till the book is done. So, or not even meet them, get to see what the end product is.
Really? Wow, I
Yeah.
never thought that.
Yeah, I think in Native, what I did find though is, well, now that we have more Native picture books, I'm finding that they're bending the rules with that because it's such a different understanding to come together and put that book together. So there is like Tracy Sorrell, who's a award-winning picture book writer. When she had her first debut book, her illustrator, they collaborated together. The illustrator got hold of her from New Zealand, used her own money to come and meet the tribe and see where this book was coming from. So there was a deeper connection with the illustrator and the writer there. And I think that's needed too.
Absolutely. I can't imagine that process being so separate. That seems
Yeah, yeah, it's hard to think of that, but you do have to let go too.
yeah. So, I mean, so one of your kids is a reporter and the other one is in acting and filmmaking, and then you're also working with illustrators. So it must be so interesting to have all of those different perspectives inform your work.
Yeah, it is fun because when we all live here in Albuquerque, and then if we're all together during a weekend and all working on a project, sitting at the big long kitchen table, it is just fun and magical to say, what do you think of this line, or what do you think of that, or what, or just quiet, and you know hard work is going on. So it really is a great to have this creativity within one family. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So we talked about this a little bit in a few minutes ago, but as an Indigenous author, I mean, how do you see your work directly impacting stereotypes specifically and misrepresentations of Indigenous people?
Well, with stereotypes and representation it goes to that there are Native stories out there, but they're written before this. I mean, most of them were written by non-Natives. And so it's coming from a different perspective. And maybe they did great research. Maybe they lived in a community where there were Native people or had some intimate knowledge. But to walk in our shoes and to be able to have our experiences, we're going to bring a whole new layer of what it means for us. And so I think that there's a hashtag that we use called Own Voices, and that it's time that we use our own voice to tell our own stories. And then we know that this place of authenticity is going to drive our stories and what we want to be seen out there, what we think is important. And so that will definitely help with stereotypes becoming from our own voice. And I think um, the other part of that too is that there's just not many of us. There's only 1% of Native writers. There's only 1% of Native children seen in children's books. And so I think it's time to step aside and let us write our own stories. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're seeing that, I mean, from my own experience in the museum world too. I mean,
Oh,
I kind of see my role as a facilitator to try to make space for other people. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of other fields, not just in literature and museum, but it's kind of a more ontological shift that's going on, hopefully.
yeah. And it's not saying that we don't all need our allies and we need to work together to make this happen, because definitely in the industry, you have a very white publishing world. And what I see happening in some areas, like at Simon and Schuster, there's a editor there that has a mentorship program, and she's not Native, she's not a person of color, but she is reaching out to mentor others in the industry. And then you also have a editor at HarperCollins working with a Native author that's been in the business for about 20 years named Cynthia Lytek Smith. And they have a whole imprint just for Native authors and just for Native stories. So this just happened this last year, and it's groundbreaking to have that focus.
Yeah.
And so it's happening. It has to happen um, in the publishing, where they are the gatekeepers to what goes out there. So you do need people like Cynthia there who can take a story and get a story from a Native author and be able to put it through her filter of what this means and what the story and experience means, that they have that understanding.
Yeah. So we're going to go into the publishing side of things. I know you have 2 books coming out, one in 2022 and one in the following year in 2023. Can you talk a little bit about those and what the process of publishing has been like for you?
Well, let's see. I can't tell you the names of the books, or because they haven't been announced yet. And there's a process to that. When you're writing a picture book, you get acquired, it's a good long process working with the editor to get your book ready. It's a good team effort. And then when it gets to the point where they select the illustrator, that's when we can announce the book. So that's the point I'm at. I'm almost done working with the editor with the first book, and the second book we're just starting. But I'm really excited that they're going to come out, and that the process of getting to this point did take, you know, going to conferences that focus on diversity, which are few and far between. There's one that's an excellent one that brought me to my Native writer community, which is called Quayle, and that's in New York City. This year it went virtual. The years before we all met together, and it's just an exciting time to get together and find people that are like-minded like you, not only as writers, but the industry people that are there supporting this. So it's an excellent conference, and it's run by Laura Pengram. And that really was a big turning point to getting to learn craft and finding people to help support. Out of that came a critique group that I meet with monthly with Native writers. And my mentor met more mentors there, more people that we just support one another.
Yeah. And I mean, we have to look on the bright side of the state of affairs in 2020 is being able to connect with people virtually, right? I found in my own circles just being able to have conferences online where I don't have to spend a whole bunch of money to travel to get there, and just being able to normalize connecting with people virtually, I think has been really beneficial for everybody.
Yeah.
But I know you can't talk about the titles, but can you give us a little teaser about what the books are about, or a little bit of plot or anything along those lines?
Right. I don't think I can give specifics, but I can say that they're drawn from my own family experiences and what I went through as a child, what my children went through. And The other book is also through, it's more of a concept book, and it's celebrates all tribal nations. And so it just is an uplifting book too. There can be soft books where you end with like a ah moment, and then there can be books where you end with a bang. So they're both very different, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're both going to be fun in their own special ways. Yeah.
Yeah, how cool. So with the first one where you're drawing on your own experiences and family stories and things like that, what is the process of turning those experiences into writing look like for you? What is your writing process for that been?
Right. I think what happens is it starts with an idea of, can it go somewhere? And trying not to make it a lesson, you know, because kids will take a book that looks like a lesson and go, poof, they're out. They want to have something fun and exciting, and they want something they can go back to and adventurous. And so it's, as an older person, as a parent, as an educator, it's like, okay, got to get the lesson out of my head and write something that kids are going to find fun to read. The words are going to capture them. There's only, you know, you're only supposed to use 500 words or less, and so every word counts. So my process is, I'm a visual person. Once I have a story idea, I start a story map. And when I worked at the medical office, I could get a big, long piece of exam paper. And then I could just let myself go and unconsciously just try to see where that's going by drawing out pictures with incidents or with where that plot can go. So very visually. And then once you think you might have something, you write it into a story. And then after you feel good about that, you can bring it to your critique group. And if they give you a positive outcome with that, of course, they're going to give you notes on this doesn't make sense, or redo this, or what did you think about that? And then you keep bringing it back to them, and you feel like, well, they're getting it and they think it's something good. Then you can go on and work on it, revise, rewrite, revise, and then bring it to your agent and see what she thinks. Does she think, she adds on the layer of, is this marketable? Because you're working as writing as a craft, but it's also a business. And so if it gets to the point where she thinks and helps, if you have an agent that's an editing agent, which I do, thank goodness, she helps me rewrite. Then if it gets to the point where it's polished enough, then she'll put it out to the different publishing companies and see if anybody's interested. So it's a long process. It can take one idea you can start with and still work on for a whole year for one small picture book. Yeah. Not a small picture book for a children's book. Yeah.
So something you just mentioned about marketing, I think is really interesting, right? Because you're writing books that have largely Indigenous content. So how have you found marketing that kind of content to a larger sphere of publishing that doesn't prioritize those types of narratives and those stories?
Well, I think you want to bring your story to a good home, a good publishing home that will do that. That does value the same diversity that you do. And they also will know that you're writing these books for a broad audience. You're not just writing them, well, my heart is writing them for my Native children, of course. But also, when you write a book, it's a window out to the world. And so that window out to the world for a Native kid is to see their window. They read a book and they can see a whole world out there. Sometimes it reflects them. Sometimes it reflects being a hero of their story. It just depends. And when a white child looks at a Native book, it opens that world in the same way too. It shows that, boy, this is a world maybe I didn't know about. And now maybe my friend that I know that's Native, I didn't know that my friend went through this, or my friend has this type of life experience. There's an understanding that's brought about. So there's that world is for everybody to see, whether it's a Native book, African American book. Sorry about that. I guess it didn't turn off. So yes, I do think that marketing a book is important, that it finds a good home. Another part of that is that educators and parents out there, you have a budget of what you're going to spend on your books. And if you believe in diversity and you want your child and you want your child's life reflected, or you want your child to see other life reflected, is that when you go to the bookstore or you go to the library, pick out those books that have diversity in it with a protagonist. And it's like giving a vote to the publishers saying, I'm going to be buying these books, and they can live out in the world too.
Right. Absolutely. And that's hopefully what we're trying to do with these conversations, is to just tell people that yes, there are all of these amazing people doing this work. You just have to find it.
Right.
So your 2 books are coming out within the next 2 to 3 years. So you're looking a lot into the future for the field, you might say. So what excites you about where children's literature is going? Are you optimistic? How are you feeling about it?
Well, I think representation has a long way to go, and it's a snail process. When I first started back in the end of 2017, looking up statistics, Native Americans in books were less than 1%. Today in 2019, the latest statistics is we're 1.2%. So when a kid opens a book that's Native, 99% of it isn't going to show who he is. So representation is very slow. It's exciting because I'm in the community of writers and I see what they're doing, and their books are amazing. But we still need to have our children see themselves represented. They need to see themselves because it tells them that they're worthy, their self-worth, that we care about that and we value them, and we value their life experiences. And it just brings pride, and it boosts their self-esteem. And books are a great tool for that. We need to see them in film. We need to see them on TV. We need more programs like Molly of Denali on PBS. And what that does for a community and what that does for a child, it's another tool to say, I'm worth it. And so representation is needed, definitely.
Yeah, and I mean, things are progressing, right? But still 1.2 is a step.
Yeah, right. And if you look at overall statistics, it is lowering the amount of just white children. It used to be about 70 or 90% white children in books. And then it went to, I think now it is 50%. But the area that grew is animals and inanimate objects at 26%. So we still only have 25% of children of color in books. You have more bears and animals and not people in books that are of color. So we need to have that change.
Absolutely. Wow. That could be another whole conversation, I think. So as we're wrapping up, I wanted to check in and see if you're reading anything fabulous right now that you'd like to share with MIAC audiences.
Sure. Let me see. As far as adult books, I'm reading The Caste System. It's an Oprah book club book, and it's a little bit of a hard read because it's trying to understand what the heck's going on right now, which we kind of know. I'm reading on Audible, what is it called? Just Kids, the Patty Smith story. And it's kind of a good read about artist journey and such back in the 60s. But what excites me now are the picture books that are coming out and the chapter books within my community. And I have a few here. Could I show them?
That would be great.
Okay, so I have, let's see. We Are Water Protectors by Carol Lindstrom. And this just came out. And also the artist is Michael Agode. She's Tlingit. And this one's being reissued, which is Jingle Dancer. And this one is by Cynthia Lytek Smith. And she also has a website called Sensations. So if you're thinking of writing, if you want to become a writer yourself or encourage your children to write, she's a great resource. Another one here is by my mentor, and this one is called In the Mountains Base by Tracy Sorrell. Her debut book was We Are Grateful, which is, I think, has many editions already out. And a fun one showing how diverse, even within our Indian community, is called Fry Bread. So if educators are also looking for history and teaching that, the great book that is helpful that's been adapted to children is Roxanne's book, An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States, adapted by Debbie Reese and Jean Mendoza. So there's a lot of good books out there. And if you just Google, we need diverse books, children's diversity, you can find some really good sources within this, what is it called? Cooperative Children's Book Center is helpful, showing you the statistics, but also resources of where you can go as an educator to help with looking at these diverse books and what's out there right now.
Great. And also Debbie Reese's blog too.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Yep.
There's actually one thing that I wanted to ask you about. In one of the books that you held up, We Are Grateful, it looked like the subtitle was in an Indigenous language. Can you talk about the importance of including Indigenous languages in all of these conversations?
What's so great about this book is that it is out in Cherokee also, the whole book. She does have it in both languages here. In the books that I have out, I sprinkle a few words of our language in there too. I just think it shows another layer of who we are, and to show and honor our languages in that way. And I do a lot of research on different Indian tribes because one of my books have visit a lot of different nations. And so in doing that, I look on their websites and I see what their nation website is doing. And there's such encouraging things happen. Most of them have language programs. Most of them have their own Indigenous schools on in their own homeland. So it's very encouraging to see language being revived in some cases and brought back. And it's great to see them in books and honoring that.
Absolutely. And for Native and non-Native kids, right? Because a lot of non-Native kids this might be a completely new concept to them, depending on their age, you know, so. Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
Is there anything else you'd like to chat about before we take off?
Just that if you want to become a Native writer or you want to become a writer as a child, just don't let anything stop you. That when you do something new and you try something that's hard, sometimes you get to a point where it's really hard and you quit. But if you can just barrel through that, you'll see that you can do it. And so we need more Native writers out there. We need more people reading Native books written by Native writers too. It's a joyful, fun process to be able to come up with a story that just began as an idea and then be able to see it come to life in a book and be able to share that with the world. So it's a very joyful process that can raise children and can help them see that they're valued.
And that's a great note to end on. So thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Laurel, for the great conversation.
Yes, thanks for having me.